She didn't say it, but he knew what she was thinking. She was wondering if this was all part of some larger scheme, if Marcus's past was catching up to him in ways that could destroy everything they had worked for. "And what's your connection to Luca?" Leah asked, her voice cold. Marcus swallowed hard, knowing this conversation was inevitable but dreading it all. "Luca and I crossed paths a few times while working with Nero. He was always in the background, handling things Nero didn't want to be publicly involved with. I didn't work directly with him, but we were part of the same world." Leah's eyes flickered with something Marcus couldn't quite place, disappointment, maybe. Or doubt. "So, he's part of your past?" Marcus nodded, his chest tight. "Yes. But that's all he is, the past. I'm not the same person I was then, Leah. You know that." "Do I?" Leah's voice was soft, but the words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He stared at her, his heart aching. He had fought so hard to change, to prove to her and himself that he was no longer the man who had thrived in Nero's corrupt world. But now, with Luca's presence looming over them, Marcus wasn't sure if Leah would ever honestly believe in his transformation. "I'm not him anymore," Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet desperation. "I've changed, Leah. I'm fighting for this city, for its people. For you." Leah's gaze softened slightly, but the doubt remained. "I want to believe that, Marcus. I do. But every time I think we're moving forward, something from your past reminds me of the man you used to be." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, his hands trembling at his sides. "I can't change the past. But I can control who I am now. And I won't let Luca destroy everything we've worked for." For a long moment, Leah said nothing, her eyes searching his face as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Marcus held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, she let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. "We need to stop him. Whatever he's planning, we can't let it happen." Marcus nodded, relief flooding through him. "We will. Together." But as they stood there, the shadows of the past looming over them, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. Later that night, as Marcus sat alone in his office, the weight of the day's events pressing down on him, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "Could we talk? The past isn't as far behind you as you think." Marcus's heart skipped a beat, his blood running cold. He didn't need to guess who the message was from. Luca. The ghosts of the past weren't just lurking in the shadows. They were coming for him. And this time, there was no escaping them. Chapter 16. Rome was quieter than usual, and the streets were eerily still, as though the entire city was holding its breath. Marcus Vitali stood at his office window, staring out at the skyline as the first rays of dawn began to break over the rooftops. It was a rare moment of peace, but Marcus knew it wouldn't last. The signs were all there, the city was on the verge of another eruption. Behind him, Nico paced the room, his face taut with urgency. "We're running out of time, Marcus. Vico's loyalists are regrouping, and the rumors about Luca are spreading like wildfire. If we don't act now, we'll lose control." Marcus didn't respond. Marcus turned away from the window, his jaw clenched. "What's the latest intelligence?" Nico stopped pacing, his eyes dark with worry. "We've confirmed that Luca is gathering the remaining loyalists in the industrial district. It's an old factory, heavily fortified. They're preparing for something big, Marcus. They're calling it the Reclamation." "The Reclamation," Marcus muttered, his chest tightening. It was precisely what he had feared, a final, desperate attempt by Nero's loyalists to reclaim the city and restore the old regime. The loyalists were fewer in number now, but they were dangerous, emboldened by Luca's presence and driven by the belief that they could turn the tide. "We need to hit them before they can organize further," Marcus declared, his voice resolute. "If we let them gain more momentum, it'll be a full-scale war in the streets." Nico nodded, but there was a hesitation in his eyes. "And what about Leah? Does she know?" Marcus felt a pang of guilt twist in his chest. Leah had been focused on rebuilding the city, pouring every ounce of her energy into creating something better from the ruins Nero had left behind. She had thrown herself into the work with a ferocity that impressed and worried Marcus, but he hadn't told her about the full extent of Luca's threat. "She knows," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure if that was entirely true. Leah knew about Luca, but he hadn't told her about the message. He hadn't wanted to burden her with more than she was already carrying, but now, as the danger loomed closer, Marcus knew he couldn't keep anything from her. "We need to move quickly," Nico said, his voice tense. "If we wait too long, Luca's men will be ready for us." Marcus nodded, his mind racing as he considered their next move. The industrial district was a stronghold, attacking it head-on would be a suicide mission. They needed to be smart about this, to cut off Luca's support before he could launch his attack. "Get the men ready," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We'll strike at dawn." Leah stood in the center of the courtyard, her arms crossed as she watched the workers move supplies into the makeshift shelters around the city. She had barely slept in days, her mind too consumed with the weight of her responsibilities. The town was still fragile, the people still reeling from the aftermath of Nero's fall, and now, with the rumors of Luca's resurgence, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. She hadn't seen much of Marcus lately. He had been distant, consumed with his plans and strategies, and while Leah understood the pressure he was under, she couldn't help but feel the growing distance between them. The question that had haunted her for so long, "Where are you going?" still lingered in the back of her mind, and though Marcus had given her his answer, Leah wasn't sure if she genuinely believed him. "Leah!" Marcus's voice pulled her from her thoughts, and she turned to see him approaching, his expression grim. There was something different about him today, an urgency, a tension that made the hairs on her neck stand up. "What's going on?" Leah asked, her brow furrowing as she met his gaze. "We've confirmed Luca's location," Marcus said, his voice low. "He's in the industrial district, gathering the remaining loyalists. They're preparing for an attack." Leah's heart sank at his words. She knew Luca was a threat, but hearing the details made it feel more natural and immediate. The city wasn't ready for another conflict after everything they had been through. "We need to strike now before they have a chance to move," Marcus continued, his eyes dark with determination. "If we wait, we risk losing control of the city." Leah stared at him, her mind racing. She knew Marcus was right, Luca couldn't be allowed to gain any more power. But the thought of launching another offensive, of dragging the people of Rome back into the chaos they had only just escaped, filled her with dread. "What about the civilians?" Leah asked, her voice filled with concern. "If we attack the industrial district, they'll be caught in the crossfire." Marcus's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Leah saw the old Marcus in his eyes, the man who had once made decisions without considering the consequences for anyone but himself. But then, just as quickly, that look was gone, replaced by something softer, something more uncertain. "We'll evacuate them first," Marcus reassured, his voice now gentle. "We'll ensure they're safe before we move." Leah let out a slow breath, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision they were about to make. It wasn't just about Luca or the loyalists, it was about the city's future, the future they had fought so hard to protect. And yet, Leah couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what they did or how hard they tried to rebuild, the shadows of the past would always lurk, waiting to tear it all down. "All right," Leah said finally, her voice steady. "Let's do it." The plan was simple, but the stakes were high. Nico and his team would begin evacuating the civilians early in the morning, moving them to temporary shelters outside the industrial district. Once the civilians were safe, Marcus, Leah, and a small group of resistance fighters would move in, cutting off Luca's access to weapons and supplies before launching a full assault on his stronghold. As dawn approached, the city was eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft shuffle of footsteps as Nico's team moved through the streets, ushering civilians to safety. Leah stood at the edge of the district, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the sun begin to rise over the horizon. This was it, the moment that would decide the future of Rome. Marcus stood beside her, his expression grim but focused. There was no room for doubt now, no time for second-guessing. They had come too far to turn back. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Leah nodded, though her stomach churned with fear and anticipation. "Let's finish this." As they moved deeper into the district, the air grew thick with tension. The factory loomed ahead, a hulking steel and concrete structure with dark and foreboding windows. Inside, Luca's men were preparing for battle, unaware their time was running out. Nico's voice crackled over the radio. "Civilians are clear. We're moving in." Marcus glanced at Leah, his jaw clenched. "Let's go." They moved swiftly, silently, cutting through the shadows as they approached the factory. The resistance fighters fanned out, taking up positions around the perimeter, ready to strike immediately. But a gunshot rang out just as they were about to breach the entrance. Chaos erupted. The factory courtyard became a battlefield instantly, gunfire echoing through the air as Luca's men poured out of the building, their weapons raised. Marcus ducked behind a stack of crates, his heart racing as bullets whizzed past his head. He glanced at Leah, crouched beside him, her face set in grim determination.